Jason had been living on the station for almost a year, and by now, he thought he had seen everything. He had seen wormhole storms tear apart trade convoys. He had seen alien diplomats throw chairs at each other during peace talks. He had even seen an entire deck of the station flooded with glowing jellyfish after a containment breach. But nothing prepared him for the moment Kari screamed those 4 words at him. "You knocked me up." The sound of her voice was so loud it made the air recycler hum differently, like even the machine was shocked. Jason froze in place, his protein pack floating out of his hand and spinning slowly in the low gravity. He turned his head toward her. Kari was standing in the doorway of their shared pod, her crest of soft blue feathers standing straight up, her 4 silver eyes wide. Her smooth skin, normally a calm teal, had turned a deep, angry violet. Jason's heart pounded in his chest. He had heard Kari raise her voice before, but never like this. She looked like she was ready to claw through the hull. She was clutching a small handheld scanner and her hands were shaking. "Kari, what?" Jason's voice came out small, almost guilty. He wasn't sure why he felt guilty yet, but he did. Kari tossed the scanner at him. It floated weightlessly toward him. Jason grabbed it and glanced at the screen. He saw a biological readout he couldn't fully understand, but he recognized enough to make his stomach twist. There was a genetic pairing signature, human DNA, his DNA, and Tari DNA, hers. A new line forming beneath them. Jason's throat went dry. "No way. That's not possible." Kari bared her sharp teeth, not in a smile. "It is very possible. It happened. And it happened because of you." Jason's mind flashed back to that night 2 months ago. The rescue mission. The fire in the reactor bay. The way Kari had dragged him out while alarms blared. They had both been injured, covered in burns and bruises. They had been stuck in the medical bay together for hours, too exhausted to speak. At some point, exhaustion had turned to comfort. Comfort had turned to something else. Jason had thought it was just one night, just a way to feel alive after almost dying. He hadn't thought about the consequences. Not like this. Jason opened his mouth to say something, but before he could get a word out, Kari slapped her palm against the wall panel. The hiss of the pod seals engaged, and the door lights turned red. The station AI spoke in a calm voice. "Habitat pod is now in lockdown mode." Jason stared at her. "You just locked us in?" "Yes," Kari snapped. "No one comes in. No one goes out." Jason's heart rate spiked. "Kari, wait, we can talk about this. We should tell the medics." "No." Kari's voice cracked. She floated toward him, her feathers bristling. "If the council finds out, they will call this a contamination event. They will call me unfit to serve. They will erase me if they have to." Jason felt cold. He knew she was right. The Galactic Council didn't play games when it came to genetic mixing. Humanity had only been part of the Council for 6 years, and most of the other species still saw them as dangerous, reckless, primitive. A half-human child would be all the proof they needed to ban humans from deep space. Kari floated back from him, her breathing sharp and quick. Her 4 eyes glistened like metal. "Do you know what this means for me? For my Clutch family? They will lose their status. They will be shamed. I will be shamed. I will be stripped of my rank. Everything I worked for will be gone." Jason wanted to say something, anything, but nothing seemed right. He could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on him, heavier than the artificial gravity ever could. He thought about Kari's words. He thought about the small, blinking symbol on the scanner that represented something alive, something that hadn't existed before. Finally, he spoke, his voice quiet. "I didn't mean to hurt you." Kari's crest lowered slightly, but her skin stayed a dark, stormy violet. "Intent does not matter. What matters is what happens now." Jason nodded slowly, gripping the scanner until his knuckles turned white. His stomach churned. "Then we figure it out. Together." Kari stared at him for a long time. Her breathing slowed, but her eyes stayed sharp. Finally, she turned away from him and curled up on her nest couch. "I don't trust you yet, human," she said quietly. Not with this. Jason didn't move. He just floated near the viewport, staring out into the endless starfield. The pod felt smaller than it ever had before, like the walls were closing in. He didn't know what was going to happen. He just knew one thing. Everything had changed. Jason didn't sleep that night. The pod was quiet except for the low hum of the recycler and Kari's soft breathing from the nest couch. He floated near the viewport, staring at the stars, his mind running in circles. He kept seeing the scanner screen, the little blinking line that meant a life had started. He felt guilty, afraid, and strangely protective all at once. When Kari woke, her skin had faded from deep violet to a dull blue, but her silver eyes still held fire. She didn't speak at first. She just floated past him to check the pod systems. Jason watched her in silence until he couldn't take it anymore. "Kari," he said softly, "we can't stay locked in forever." Her feathers rippled in irritation, but she didn't turn around. "If we go out there, we are finished. Do you not understand? The council will open a tribunal. They will not wait to study this, they will erase it." Jason floated closer, careful not to touch her. "You mean they'll erase you? And maybe me, and whatever this is." Kari turned suddenly, her eyes shining with anger. "Yes, you think this is a joke? My people do not allow uncontrolled reproduction. Hybrid offspring are seen as a contamination event. They will not just erase me. They will burn my family's name from the records. They will act like I never existed." Her voice cracked, and Jason could see how much it hurt her to even imagine that. He felt a twist in his chest. She wasn't just angry. She was scared. Jason floated back and pressed his palm against the cold viewport glass. "Then what do you want to do?" Kari hesitated, her crest lowering a little. "I should terminate it. That would end the problem. It would protect my people. It would protect me." Jason turned his head sharply. "Do you want to?" Kari froze. Her breathing slowed and her eyes softened slightly. "I do not know," she said finally. "In my body I can feel it. It is small but alive. If I end it, I end something that belongs to me. Something that is half me." Jason felt his stomach turn. He imagined being told to erase a life before it had even begun. "Then don't," he said quietly. "If you want to keep it, then we keep it safe." Kari's eyes narrowed. "You would risk everything for this?" "For me?" Jason nodded. "Yeah, you saved my life more than once. I'm not letting you face this alone." For a long time, Kari just stared at him. Her feathers slowly lowered and the tension in her body eased slightly. She floated back to the nest couch and sat down, her long fingers gripping the edge. "If we do this, there is no going back. We will have to hide from the council. From my people. From everyone." Jason's throat was dry, but he forced himself to speak. "Then we hide, we plan. We make sure they can't touch you or the baby." Kari tilted her head, studying him. "You sound very sure for someone who has no plan." Jason gave a weak smile. "I'll think of one." She looked at him for a long moment before finally letting out a long breath. "Very well. But if we do this, we do it my way. We need supplies, power cells, food packs. We need to make sure no one notices this pod is still occupied. I can rewrite the station's logs." Jason nodded. "I can handle the supplies. I know how to slip past the quartermaster without raising alarms." Kari gave a small sound that might have been a laugh. "Of course you do. Humans are good at sneaking." For the first time since the shouting, Jason saw a hint of something in her expression that wasn't fear or anger. It was small, but it was hope. They spent the next hours making lists, whispering to each other as though someone might be listening through the walls. Jason had never seen Kari so focused. Her four hands moved quickly across the data slates, rewriting security codes and redirecting sensor sweeps. Jason found himself admiring her even more, not just for her skill but for her courage. She was willing to throw away everything she had worked for, just to give this small life a chance. When they finally stopped to rest, Kari floated near him. She looked tired but calmer. "Jason," she said softly, "when this started I wanted to kill you. But now." She hesitated. "Now I think maybe this happened for a reason." Jason smiled faintly. "Then let's make sure that reason survives." Kari's crest lowered and her eyes softened. She reached out and touched his hand for the first time since the lockdown began. The simple touch sent a warmth through Jason's chest. For the first time since this nightmare began, Jason felt like maybe, just maybe, they could find a way out of it. The next hours stretched into a long, heavy silence. Jason floated by the viewport, staring out at the endless stars beyond, while Kari sat curled in her nest couch. The pod felt smaller than ever. Jason could almost hear the weight of their secret pressing down on the walls. He kept thinking about what Kari had said, about erasing the life growing inside her. He tried to imagine how much courage it took for her not to go through with it. He didn't know what to say that wouldn't make things worse, so he said nothing. But in his mind, he made a promise. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't let her face it alone. Kari finally broke the silence. "You do not understand what it means to lose your clutch name," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the wall. "Among my people, it is worse than death. I will not just be cast out, I will be forgotten. My family will act like I was never born." Jason turned from the viewport to face her. "Then we make sure they never get the chance to do that. We keep you safe. We keep this baby safe." Kari tilted her head, her feathers shifting slightly. "You speak as if you are sure it can be done. You speak like a soldier." Jason gave a small shrug. "I was a soldier. Back on Earth, I've had to protect people before." Kari studied him for a moment as if she was seeing him in a new light. "I still do not know why you care," she said slowly. "You could call the council. Tell them it was my doing. They would release you." Jason floated closer to her. "Because I was there too. Because I said yes that night. Because I won't let the galaxy punish you for something we both chose." Kari's silver eyes softened a little, but her skin still glowed a troubled blue. "This will not be easy. We will have to disappear. If the council learns you are gone, they will look for you." "For us," Jason nodded. "Then we planned carefully." They began working together in earnest. Kari rewrote the pod's life support logs to show no life signs. Jason moved carefully through the pod's maintenance hatch to access nearby storage units, pulling what supplies he could find without tripping alarms. They worked silently at times, talking only when necessary, but with every passing hour they began to move more like a team. Still, there were moments of tension. When Jason returned from one supply run, he found Kari sitting in the dark, her arms wrapped around herself. Her feathers were flat and her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "Kari," Jason said softly. "What's wrong?" She didn't look at him. "I am thinking about what will happen when this child is born," she whispered. "What if it does not survive? What if it cannot live with mixed blood?" Jason felt a pang in his chest. He floated closer and sat across from her. "Then we do everything we can to give it a chance. That's all we can do. The rest..." He hesitated. "The rest we face together." Kari turned her head slowly, her 4 eyes meeting his. "Together," she repeated quietly. The word sounded strange on her tongue, but there was something in her voice, something fragile, that made Jason feel stronger. As the station cycled into night, the pod became darker. Jason floated near Kari, close enough to feel the warmth of her presence but not touching. He could hear the soft rhythm of her breathing. For the first time since the shouting, it felt almost calm. Jason closed his eyes, but he didn't sleep. He was thinking about what they were about to do. They were not just hiding from the council. They were choosing to run, to vanish from the lives they had known. And yet, as he watched Kari drift into light sleep, Jason felt something stirring in him. Not just fear, not just duty, something like hope. He had almost died once, and that night with Kari had felt like grabbing hold of life again. Maybe this child was another chance, a chance to do something good, something that mattered. When morning came, Kari woke and floated over to him. "I have finished rewriting the logs," she said quietly. "No one will know we are still here." Jason gave her a tired smile. "Then it's time to finish gathering supplies. Once we're ready, we get out of here." Kari's feathers rippled, and for the first time, Jason thought it looked like relief. "You sound very sure," Jason nodded. "I have to be, for you. For both of you." Kari stared at him for a long time, then finally gave a small nod. "Then we do this, together." And for the first time since the pod had gone into lockdown, Kari smiled, small and faint but real. The next cycle brought with it a sense of urgency neither of them could ignore. Jason woke to the sound of Kari tapping rapidly on the data slate, her feathers bristling in agitation. Her skin had turned a pale shade of blue that Jason was beginning to recognize as stress. "They are running a station-wide check," she said without looking up. "It is a routine sweep, but if they find a power imbalance or an oxygen leak, they will send someone to inspect this pod." Jason rubbed his face and floated toward her. "How long do we have?" Kari's 4 silver eyes flicked toward him, then back to the slate. "Maybe 1 or 2 cycles before they noticed the altered logs." Jason's chest tightened. "That wasn't much time. Then we finish this today." Kari hesitated. "Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we leave, there will be no way back. If we are caught in restricted space, the council will have the right to destroy this pod." Jason held her gaze. "I'm sure. If we stay, we lose anyway." At least out there we have a chance. Kari studied him for a moment, then gave a slow nod. Then we will need to reroute the pod's navigation controls manually. The station AI will try to stop an unauthorized launch. Jason grinned slightly despite the tension. Good thing I was a mechanic before I was a soldier. They worked side by side for hours. Jason removed paneling, crawling into narrow spaces to disconnect the pod's launch safeties. Kari stayed by the console, overriding system protocols. They spoke little, but every time Jason looked up, he saw her focused expression. Her feathers slicked close to her skull in concentration. She was risking everything, and yet she was calm, calmer than he felt. At one point, Jason cut power to a secondary circuit and the lights flickered out. Kari hissed in alarm, her feathers flaring, but Jason managed to reroute power a moment later. When the lights came back, she gave him a sharp look. "Sorry," he said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Not my smoothest work." Kari's expression softened slightly. "You are trying. That is enough." Her words hit Jason harder than he expected. They reminded him of home, of the way his mother used to say the same thing when he was a boy. He swallowed the lump in his throat and got back to work. Later, as they took a short break, Kari floated near him. "Jason," she said softly, "why did you leave your planet?" Jason hesitated, then answered honestly. "I lost people. My unit, my friends. I didn't know how to stay after that." Space felt like a way to start over. Kari tilted her head, her eyes glimmering. "And now you are risking that new life for me." Jason met her gaze. "For you. For the kid. For us." Kari's feathers rippled slightly and she looked away. But Jason thought he saw a faint glow in her skin that wasn't stress this time. It looked almost like pride. By the end of the cycle, they had everything ready. Food packs, oxygen tanks, emergency rations, spare power cells. Jason had disconnected the pod's failsafes, leaving them free to launch whenever they wanted. But the closer they came to leaving, the heavier the tension grew. Kari sat quietly by the viewport, watching the slow spin of the station. "When we do this," she said quietly, "the station will mark us as deserters. My people will call me a traitor." Jason floated beside her. "They can call you whatever they want. You're not a traitor. You're protecting your child." Kari turned to face him, her eyes searching his face. "You speak as if you know me very well." Jason smiled softly. "I'm starting to." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was no longer hostile. It was heavy, but it felt like they were sharing the weight together. Suddenly, a faint alarm tone sounded through the pod. Kari snapped her head toward the console. "Inspection drones are active. They will reach this section within 2 hours." Jason's pulse quickened. "Then we go tonight." Kari's feathers trembled. "Are you ready?" Jason glanced around the pod, at the supplies they had gathered, at the stars outside the viewport. Then he looked at Kari, really looked at her, and nodded. "Yeah, I'm ready." Kari placed a hand over her midsection, her voice barely a whisper. "Then so am I." Jason floated to the control panel and took a deep breath. "When the station goes into night cycle, we release clamps and fire thrusters. We'll have a few minutes before they notice." Kari nodded and began keying in the final overrides. "We will only get one chance, Jason. If we fail, then we don't fail," he said, his voice firm. Kari looked at him, and for the first time since this started, Jason saw no fear in her eyes, only determination. Whatever came next, they were in it together. The hours crawled by until the station's lights dimmed, signaling night cycle. Jason strapped himself into the pilot seat and glanced at Kari. She was calm, her feathers lying flat, her silver eyes focused. Jason reached over and squeezed her hand. "Here we go," he said. Kari squeezed back, her voice low and steady. "Here we go." Jason's fingers hovered over the manual launch controls, his heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. In that moment, the whole galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The moment the station lights dimmed completely, Jason hit the manual release. The clamps disengaged with a loud metallic clang that echoed through the pod. Jason felt the sudden shift as they drifted free of the docking port. For a brief, weightless moment, they were just another piece of metal in the void. "Firing thrusters," Jason said, his voice tight. The pod's engines hummed, soft at first and then louder as they pushed away from the station. Through the viewport, Jason watched the massive habitat wheel shrink behind them. Kari gripped the edge of her seat with all 4 hands, her feathers pressed flat against her skull. "Trajectory locked," Jason said, trying to keep his voice calm. "We're headed toward the neutral zone." Kari nodded, her silver eyes never leaving the viewport. They will notice soon. Almost on cue, a warning blared from the pod's console. Kari leaned forward and silenced it quickly, her fingers flying across the controls. Docking control has flagged our launch. They are hailing us. Jason's stomach twisted. If we answer, they'll track us. If we do not answer, they will send drones, Kari replied. We must disappear from their sensors. Jason nodded and started working on the secondary systems. I can reroute the transponder. Make it look like a debris fragment. Kari glanced at him, her feathers rippling. Do it quickly. Jason worked fast, his fingers moving over the manual controls, cutting power to non-essential systems, masking their energy signature. The pod went dim, leaving only the faint glow of the emergency lights. Outside, the stars shone brighter and the station looked farther away. Jason felt his heart slow just a little. We're a ghost now, he said quietly. They'll have a hard time finding us. Kari let out a long breath, her feathers relaxing slightly. You may be reckless, Jason, but you are not useless. Jason laughed softly, the sound breaking some of the tension. I'll take that as a compliment. The laughter faded quickly, though, as reality sank in. They were really gone. There was no going back now. Jason floated back from the controls and stared at the shrinking image of the station. That's it, he said quietly. We just left everything behind. Kari's voice softened. Yes, everything. She placed a hand over her midsection. But we saved this. Jason looked at her and nodded slowly. Yeah, we did. For a while they sat in silence, letting the hum of the engines fill the pod. Jason could feel the weight of what they had done settling on him. He thought of the friends he had on the station, of the job he had worked so hard to get. All of it was gone now. Kari must have sensed his thoughts. Do you regret it? She asked softly. Jason shook his head after a long pause. No, I'd regret it more if we stayed. Kari gave a small nod. Then we keep going. We cannot stop until we are beyond patrol range. Jason turned back to the controls. Then let's see how far this pod can take us. Hours passed as they traveled through deep space. Jason kept checking the scanners, but there was no sign of pursuit. Kari dozed lightly in her seat, her feathers glowing faintly. Jason watched her for a long time, feeling something shift inside him. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about building something new. When Kari woke, she floated closer to him. You stayed at the controls all night, she said quietly. Jason smiled faintly. Couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about what comes next. Kari tilted her head. And what comes next, Jason? He shrugged. We find somewhere safe. Somewhere we can stay until the baby comes. Somewhere no one will find us. Kari was quiet for a moment, then reached out and touched his shoulder. Wherever that is, I will go with you. Jason felt a warmth spread through his chest. He nodded. Then we'll find it. Together. Through the viewport, the stars stretched on forever, cold and distant. But for the first time, Jason didn't feel small. He felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. And as the little pod sailed farther from the station, carrying 2 fugitives and the first child of 2 worlds, Jason allowed himself a small smile. The galaxy might come after them. The council might brand them criminals. But they had made their choice. They were free. The days in deep space blurred together, but Jason and Kari quickly fell into a rhythm. Jason managed the pod systems, monitoring fuel and oxygen, while Kari focused on the navigation charts and food rations. Life became simple, but tension still lingered in the quiet moments. Kari's body was changing quickly. Her feathers had taken on a softer glow and she tired more easily. Jason noticed, and though she never complained, he adjusted their schedule so she could rest more often. One night, Jason woke to find Kari floating near the viewport, staring at the endless stars. Her feathers were dim, almost dull. Couldn't sleep? Jason asked softly. Kari shook her head. I am thinking about what will happen to the child. It will not be like me. It will not be like you. Jason floated closer and put a hand on the edge of the viewport. Then it'll be something new. Something the galaxy's never seen. Kari looked at him with tired silver eyes. That frightens me. Jason hesitated before speaking. Yeah, me too. But it also sounds kind of amazing. Kari tilted her head, studying him. You believe it will survive? Jason gave her a firm nod. It has to. We came this far for it. Kari was silent for a moment, then floated closer until their foreheads touched. You are strange, Jason. Strange but strong. Jason chuckled softly. I've been called worse. They shared a quiet moment there, just breathing together, before Kari drifted back to her seat and finally closed her eyes. Days later, they encountered their first real challenge. A micro-meteor shower tore through space ahead of them, tiny shards of rock and metal flashing past the viewport. Jason cursed under his breath and grabbed the manual controls. Hold on! The pod shook violently as small impacts rang out like hail on a roof. Kari gripped her harness, her feathers standing on end. Shields will not last long, she warned. Jason gritted his teeth and steered them through the thickest part of the field, weaving between glowing chunks of debris. His hands were steady, but sweat ran down his forehead. After what felt like hours, the pod cleared the last of the storm. Jason let out a long breath and checked the damage report. Hull's intact. We lost a comm relay, but we're still flying. Kari nodded slowly, her body relaxing. You're a good pilot. Jason smirked tiredly. Guess I had to be tonight. That night, Kari reached for his hand as she slept, something she had never done before. Jason didn't move. He stayed like that, watching her breathing slow, feeling strangely protective. Weeks passed and Kari's belly grew rounder. Jason noticed the way she hummed softly sometimes, a low, soothing sound that filled the pod. He found himself talking to her more, about Earth, about the station, about the life he never thought he'd leave behind. She listened quietly, occasionally asking questions about oceans, trees, and rain. One day, as Jason was repairing a loose panel, Kari floated closer and placed a hand over his. I want to see these things you speak of. I want the child to see them. Jason looked at her and smiled. Then we'll find a way. Once we're safe, I'll take you both there. Kari stared at him for a long moment. You promise? Jason nodded. Yeah, I promise. Kari gave a slow, solemn nod, as though sealing the words between them. Then I will believe you. Later that night, Jason wrote a short log entry on the pod's console. We're still alive. She's still strong. And for the first time, I believe we might actually make it. As he looked at Kari sleeping peacefully, he realized something had changed inside him. This wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about giving her and the child a future worth living for. And Jason knew deep down that no matter what came next, he wouldn't let anything take that away from them. Kari's breathing grew heavy as the weeks turned into their final days in the pod. Jason had learned to read her signs by now, when her feathers rippled with pain, when she clutched her belly and forced herself to stay silent. The child was coming soon, and there was no medic, no sterile chamber, no help but him. Jason. Kari whispered one night, her voice thin. It is time. Jason's heart jumped. He moved quickly, clearing the cramped pod's floor and fastening whatever straps and cushions he could find to create a place for her to lie. Kari settled down, her breathing sharp and fast. Jason held her hand, feeling how hard she squeezed. You're going to be fine, Jason said, though fear gripped his stomach. I'm right here. I'm not going anywhere. Kari let out a low hiss of pain but nodded. Hours passed in a blur of labor. Jason did everything he could, wiping sweat from her brow, murmuring encouragement, steadying her when the contractions made her whole body tremble. The pod felt impossibly small, like the walls were closing in. Then at last a cry pierced the pod, thin, high, and alive. Jason froze for a moment, then laughed, shaking with relief. He lifted the tiny newborn carefully, its downy feathers still damp, its small fingers clutching weakly at the air. Kari reached out with trembling arms, and Jason placed the child against her chest. Her feathers glowed faintly, soft and warm. It lives, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Jason sat back, exhausted but smiling. Yeah, he said softly. It lives. For a while they stayed like that, just staring at the child who had made everything they'd risked worth it. Jason had never seen Kari look so peaceful. Their moment was interrupted by a sudden alarm. Jason's head snapped up. A proximity alert flashed red across the console. A ship was approaching. They found us, Jason said grimly. Kari slowly sat up, still clutching the baby. Then we fight. Jason hesitated, then nodded. He strapped himself into the pilot's chair and powered up the pod's engines. Through the viewport, he saw the approaching vessel, a patrol craft fast and armed. They're hailing us, Jason said, his hands tight on the controls. Do not answer, Kari said firmly. They will take the child. Jason swallowed hard and made his choice. He diverted all remaining power to the thrusters and shields. Hold on to the baby. The pod leapt forward, engines roaring. The patrol ship followed, closing the distance. Jason's mind raced as he steered through an asteroid field using the rocks as cover. Small explosions lit up behind them as the patrol fired warning shots. Kari clutched the baby tight but never cried out. Her silver eyes burned with determination. "You will not have us," she whispered. Jason pushed the pod harder, dodging a massive spinning rock by mere meters. Alarms blared, but he kept going. Finally, he spotted a dense cluster of debris ahead, the remnants of some long-dead ship. He dove into it, cutting power at the last moment and letting the pod drift silently. The patrol ship scanned the field, but without their engine signature, the pod was just another piece of junk. After a tense few minutes, the patrol ship turned away and vanished into the stars. Jason let out a shuddering breath. His hands were still shaking. "We made it," he said. Kari smiled faintly, her feathers glowing again as she looked at the baby. "We made it," she repeated softly. Jason floated over and sat beside her, staring down at the tiny life they had risked everything to protect. "We can't keep running forever," he said quietly. "We need somewhere to land. Somewhere safe." Kari nodded slowly. "Then we will find it." Jason smiled and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there was a planet where they could start again. Somewhere their child could grow up without fear. For now they had survived, and that was enough. Jason wrapped an arm around Kari and the baby, holding them close as the pod drifted through the endless night. Whatever came next, they would face it together. For the first time since this all began, Jason felt not just hope, but purpose. The next hours stretched into a long, heavy silence. Jason floated by the viewport, staring out at the endless stars beyond, while Kari sat curled in her nest couch. The pod felt smaller than ever. Jason could almost hear the weight of their secret pressing down on the walls. He kept thinking about what Kari had said, about erasing the life growing inside her. He tried to imagine how much courage it took for her not to go through with it. He didn't know what to say that wouldn't make things worse, so he said nothing. But in his mind, he made a promise. Whatever happened next, he wouldn't let her face it alone. Kari finally broke the silence. "You do not understand what it means to lose your clutch name," she said softly, her eyes fixed on the wall. "Among my people, it is worse than death. I will not just be cast out, I will be forgotten. My family will act like I was never born." Jason turned from the viewport to face her. "Then we make sure they never get the chance to do that. We keep you safe. We keep this baby safe." Kari tilted her head, her feathers shifting slightly. "You speak as if you are sure it can be done. You speak like a soldier." Jason gave a small shrug. "I was a soldier. Back on Earth, I've had to protect people before." Kari studied him for a moment as if she was seeing him in a new light. "I still do not know why you care," she said slowly. "You could call the council. Tell them it was my doing. They would release you." Jason floated closer to her. "Because I was there too. Because I said yes that night. Because I won't let the galaxy punish you for something we both chose." Kari's silver eyes softened a little, but her skin still glowed a troubled blue. "This will not be easy. We will have to disappear. If the council learns you are gone, they will look for you." "For us," Jason nodded. "Then we planned carefully." They began working together in earnest. Kari rewrote the pod's life support logs to show no life signs. Jason moved carefully through the pod's maintenance hatch to access nearby storage units, pulling what supplies he could find without tripping alarms. They worked silently at times, talking only when necessary. But with every passing hour, they began to move more like a team. Still, there were moments of tension. When Jason returned from one supply run, he found Kari sitting in the dark, her arms wrapped around herself. Her feathers were flat and her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. "Kari?" Jason said softly. "What's wrong?" She didn't look at him. "I am thinking about what will happen when this child is born," she whispered. "What if it does not survive? What if it cannot live with mixed blood?" Jason felt a pang in his chest. He floated closer and sat across from her. "Then we do everything we can to give it a chance. That's all we can do. The rest—" He hesitated. "The rest we face together." Kari turned her head slowly, her 4 eyes meeting his. "Together," she repeated quietly. The word sounded strange on her tongue, But there was something in her voice, something fragile, that made Jason feel stronger. As the station cycled into night, the pod became darker. Jason floated near Kari, close enough to feel the warmth of her presence but not touching. He could hear the soft rhythm of her breathing. For the first time since the shouting, it felt almost calm. Jason closed his eyes, but he didn't sleep. He was thinking about what they were about to do. They were not just hiding from the council. They were choosing to run, to vanish from the lives they had known. And yet, as he watched Kari drift into light sleep, Jason felt something stirring in him. Not just fear, not just duty, something like hope. He had almost died once, and that night with Kari had felt like grabbing hold of life again. Maybe this child was another chance, a chance to do something good, something that mattered. When morning came, Kari woke and floated over to him. "I have finished rewriting the logs," she said quietly. "No one will know we are still here." Jason gave her a tired smile. "Then it's time to finish gathering supplies. Once we're ready, we get out of here." Kari's feathers rippled, and for the first time, Jason thought it looked like relief. "You sound very sure," Jason nodded. "I have to be for you. For both of you." Kari stared at him for a long time, then finally gave a small nod. "Then we do this together." And for the first time since the pod had gone into lockdown, Kari smiled, small and faint, but real.